The mission Halo in Halo Combat Evolved is fantastic, but I don't think it gets anywhere near the credit it deserves. Other levels like the Silent Cartographer and 343 Guilty Spark may be talked about a lot more, but Halo does an excellent job of demonstrating very early on why the game's campaign is so special. And I think it's also a great blueprint for how I'd like Halo Infinite's open world to be structured, which I'll also talk about in a bit more detail during this video. Halo kicks off with Master Chief crash landing on Installation 04 following the Covenant attack on the Pillar of Autumn. Unfortunately, everyone else in the escape pod is dead.
Yeah, there's the impact. There's nothing we can do.
And it's then up to Master Chief to search the area for any survivors. As you cross the bridge, a Covenant dropship flies overhead, and I like that Bungie funnels you away from the escape pod before the dropship arrives on the scene. Having only played the mission The Pillar of Autumn prior, you won't have seen one of these dropships before, but you will encounter them a lot during Halo as the mission progresses, so here you're given an opportunity to watch one from a distance, so you then hopefully understand exactly how they function. You'll also be attacked by a Banshee, and you're then given the choice as to whether to simply take it down and move on, or also take on the elite and grunts inspecting the area surrounding the escape pod. Between them, the environment that was extraordinarily open for a console first-person shooter back in 2001, and the view of the ring itself, these early moments in the mission do a great job of imbuing Combat Evolved with an incredible sense of scale right off the bat. Moving on, you'll encounter another elite flanked by a few grunts, before rounding a corner where you'll discover another dropship. Having recently seen how they operate, you'll better understand this time what their purpose is, and after taking down another Covenant squad, you'll meet the mission's first group of Marines. Their chatter has always been one of my favourite parts of Combat Evolved.
Good to see you, sir. I thought we were the only ones who made it off the Pillar of Autumn.
But there's not time for too much of a chinwag, as you're then tasked with fending off multiple dropships, which now also carry jackals, and this is the first time you will have seen this new feathered foe during the campaign. This area is your first proper introduction to the game's wonderful sandbox combat, and it's important that it's included prior to the mission opening up later on. It gives you the chance to get used to combat in a more open space than anything you've encountered prior, so you're then used to the concept ahead of being given more freedom a little later in the mission. With the Covenant dispatched, you witness more escape pods flying overhead, giving you your next objective, and Foehammer drops off a Warthog. You're again here given a little bit of time to get used to the vehicle before you encounter any Covenant while driving it, and there's also a slightly strange line from Cortana here.
This cave is not a natural formation. Someone built it, so it must lead somewhere.
Bungie originally intended for the cave to look a lot more natural than it does in the final release, and so Cortana's line here would have served a purpose, but in the end it was decided that it would be easier to use Forerunner architecture instead. The line, however, was never removed, hence it feeling a little like Cortana is stating the obvious. The next area isn't hugely exciting, other than this elite I forgot about which made me jump out of my seat, but it is a classic example of Bungie's open to narrow design philosophy. One of the things that makes Combat Evolved so engaging is the way the game rapidly switches between narrow and open environments. It's evident in this mission as you move from the first encounter to this area and then back to a more expansive space, and you'll experience similar in just about every mission in the campaign. And at a higher level, it even happens between missions as well. The Pillar of Autumn is very narrow, and this is followed up by the much more open Halo. Events then transition to more enclosed spaces for Truth and Reconciliation, before the campaign again opens up during the Silent Cartographer. It is in my view the #1 reason why Halo titles always feel so wonderfully paced, and it's a design philosophy that's still used in the series to this very day. Once you head outside again, things begin to really open up, and you're able to choose between 3 different areas to head to next. And it's here I want to quickly talk about Halo Infinite, because I think the way Halo is set up would be the perfect way to structure the game now it's been confirmed that it's moving to a much more open world. What you have here is essentially a hub area which funnels you into 3 smaller, more directed encounters. You can choose to take them on in any order you please, but you'll always come back to this central area when moving from one to the next. Series that move from more linear experiences into more spacious environments between games often lose some of the tightly directed design which made them so engaging to begin with, but funneling players like Halo does ensures that isn't the case for its own open areas. You can still approach some of them from different paths, but these paths ensure that Bungie knows where you're going to be entering each engagement from. That makes the mission as a whole feel a lot more open than it actually is, but not to the point where individual areas feel completely random. The way these areas are designed can still be directed to a certain degree in terms of scripted events events and enemy placement, but they also give you a much greater sense of freedom than you would otherwise experience. If Infinite was structured in a similar way, then this means the hub area could then be home to more freeform design where enemies could repopulate certain areas or special one-off events could take place. This is something Halo also does, for example when the dropship ferries new enemies into the area. My big worry with Infinite is that things might just be placed all over the map for you to approach in any direction, which means by design the encounters that take place in and around them will never feel quite as epic as they could do. If Infinite is completely open, then 343 Industries would never be sure of how exactly you will approach any given scenario, which in turn means events can never be too directed in terms of how they play out. Halo solves this problem beautifully by both giving you freedom but also subtly taking it away when it needs to, and it works fantastically well. I'm by no means saying that a Halo Infinite that is truly open can't still be an amazing experience, but I think the blueprint Halo lays down in Combat Evolved is one which could still work incredibly well on a far larger scale. The encounters themselves aren't too dissimilar from the ones you fought towards the beginning of the level, but they're all slightly different in their own way. One pushes you to get up close and personal as you rescue Marines underground, another directs you to high ground where you'll engage in long-range combat, and the third feels like a mixture of the two, with a central structure in the middle which you can occupy if you prefer short-range combat, surrounded by hills which encourage taking on enemies from a distance. The environments themselves aren't particularly varied, they all feature green hills and grey Forerunner buildings, but the way they're structured to encourage you to try different styles of combat I really like. There are also plenty of sniper rifles you can pick up in and around these areas, which I again think is a great example of why Halo's structure would work so perfectly for Infinite. Bungie knows that there are plenty of opportunities to snipe enemies from a distance during this section, so it gives you the tools to do just that. They essentially use the weapons available in the environment as you explore the area to direct your playstyle. You don't have to use the sniper rifle of course, but I'd imagine most will, at least on their very first playthrough. And speaking of the sniper rifle, this section also acts as something of a training area for Truth and Reconciliation. Here you have plenty of opportunities to put the sniper rifle through its paces from a safe distance and get used to how it works, before you're then tasked with being a little bit sneakier and using it to its fullest potential during the following mission. Once all three sets of Marines have been saved, Halo draws to a close, and I have one final thing I want to very quickly mention: the Anniversary Edition's graphics. In a word, I really don't like them all that much at all. I've nothing against more detail being added, and in certain parts of the game, such as the start of Truth and Reconciliation, they work quite well, but here the colours are overly saturated and bright, and on the whole I just don't think it works. Sure, it makes things prettier, but honestly I just think it makes Halo feel a little too different from its original concept. To conclude, Halo is a criminally underrated mission. It does a great job of making Installation 04 feel like a sprawling world without lessening the impact of Combat Evolved's incredible mechanics. It may not receive the same praise as some of the campaign's more high-profile missions, but for me at least, it's an early indication of just how strong Bungie's understanding of console first-person shooters really was. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and Spartans. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments and perhaps consider liking and subscribing if you're feeling extra generous, and hopefully I'll see you all again soon.